Hey, what's up, everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be reading At the Mountains of Madness. So, At the Mountains of Madness is a 1936 short story written by H.P. Lovecraft, who we've talked about on this show before. And this one is kind of considered by a lot of people like his magnum opus. It's probably his most well-known piece of work, and one of, if not the predominant piece of literature he's written in what is now kind of known as the Cthulhu mythos. And basically, the story is about an expedition to Antarctica, where they kind of uncover this lost city that is millions of years old, and it appears to have been built by an intelligent civilization that that was around long before any human civilization and before the human species even evolved. They've been around during the Mesozoic period. So when dinosaurs were around, they were intelligent life forms capable of building an advanced civilization, and they all kind of appear to worship kind of Cthulhu. And they'd have these grand beings called Sagoths that essentially can be manipulated and turned into different things to kind of help create these civilizations. And through the course of the expedition, they kind of uncover all these crazy beings. They kind of start diving into this mythology, this secret history of the world and how everything kind of came to be, such as kind of the Cthulhu mythology, where it's this darker, almost more sinister, if you will, but at the same time indifferent kind of truth of the universe. When you find out it was all kind of made and put together by, these beings that just have no remorse or reverence for essentially us. That we are essentially just kind of a byproduct, really, of a sequence of events that they kind of set in motion a very long time ago. And the reason why the story is called At the Mountains of Madness, because as you draw near to kind of Cthulhu and his ilk, their intellect is so vast, the scope of what they are is so expansive that to be near them is to be essentially kind of almost driven mad. Like, essentially, we are just these small, kind of frail things in comparison to the grandeur of kind of all the things that comprise kind of H.P. Lovecraft's kind of dark mythology that he's kind of created. And that's kind of what this story is about, really, when you kind of strip away the first layers of it. It's really just about how frail humanity really is. I mean, humanity kind of prides itself and touts itself as kind of this end-all, be-all thing, when in actuality we are very, very small, and we're just these insignificant things crawling on a piece of cosmic driftwood. And depending, if you're a fan of Lovecraft, that's kind of his thing. There's no a heart to it. There's no sentimentality. It's all just very bleak. If you're like me, you love that kind of thing, so he's right up your alley. But that's essentially what it is, that we don't matter. We've never mattered. We're a byproduct of a byproduct of a byproduct. To say we are insignificant is already giving ourselves far too much credit. Again, if you're familiar with Lovecraft, this is kind of standard fanfare for him. But yeah, so it really is about kind of the frailty of mankind and just how weak we really are, and essentially, venturing into these darker places in the world where we inhabit is this kind of very top level epidermal layer of reality as we know it. And when we kind of go past that initial layer and we dig deeper into the kind of the fabric of reality, we are met with forces that A, we don't really comprehend, and B, cannot truly fathom, and so much so that it undoes all that we are. So all that makes us who we are is something so very fragile that can be undone on a whim by this deeper level of just kind of reality and beings of a type of existence that we can only get a glimpse of, but never truly understand ourselves. And I know maybe all this sounds kind of very cryptic and, dare I say, artsy-fartsy, and if that's how you feel, well, you're not wrong, but the way the story is written, the way it's presented, the way it kind of starts layering out a lot of the mythology here, you find yourself just kind of being taken in by it, even though it is something very bleak, but it's so fascinating to kind of find yourself questioning the very nature of literally everything you see around you every day, and asking yourself just how, you know, paper thin it all really is, and how paper thin our not just reality is, but our perception of reality. And that's kind of what this story and a lot of the other ones he does in this Cthulhu mythology, that kind of does. It forces you to kind of really show you the frailty of man. We saw this in the Call of Cthulhu, where you can see just how the influence of these beings and what it can do to humanity. Not even having them physically there present, but just their influence. And to be now in a domain that was constructed in kind of their name and their worship, to kind of, herald their arrival, so to speak. It just kind of shows you that we ourselves cannot really be in their midst. We are just too frail. So unlike other stories where you encounter otherworldly, other dimensional beings, where even if they're greater and more grand than us, we can still interact with them. We can still come face to face with them. Where this is a story where we can't even be in their presence. We can't have that faithful encounter, that first meeting, because just to be around, to be in their presence, to be near their essence, is to undo what we are. So it's a very fascinating story for that, because it's a very, I want to say, a humbling story, but I don't really think even that does it justice, because this really is a narrative that strips away all the kind of the self-importance that we put on ourselves. So again, if you're looking for a nice heaping spoonful of humble pie, this is your story. And if you're kind of new to this kind of concept, this idea of, cosmic horror, as it's come to be known as, and, Lovecraft, for the most part, is kind of considered the godfather of that. Certainly not the only one to tap into that, but really the first one to kind of develop, like, kind of a lot of the rules and aesthetics of what we kind of now know to be cosmic horror. And this, and as well as a few other ones, but a lot of times this one is kind of the story that really a lot of people who are, either familiar with Lovecraft, his work, or this genre will kind of, harken back to. At the Mountains of Madness is kind of, when you first read it, it's not going to be the most dynamic thing you've ever read, but it has all the components of the genre, and it basically kind of sets up this whole notion of bleakness, which we have seen kind of be very pervasive in both literature and film. If you've ever watched John Carpenter's The Thing, which I've done and you should be watching of, that whole film has a narrative, or a kind of a narrative tone that is very similar. I wouldn't necessarily say it's cosmic, or kind of is, but there's that sense of bleakness, that feeling of emptiness, but which at the same time is also very attractive in a weird way, because it's a type of darkness that both repels and draws you in at the same time. And a lot of other storytellers and filmmakers have kind of been influenced by and tapped into this kind of, this notion, this feeling of, essentially pointlessness, which, again, it all sounds very weird, especially for a video that's recommending you to read this story. But when you read it, you kind of understand that it puts kind of us in a place. And while not saying there are beings of this nature out there, I mean, if there were, who knows, right? But in an age where, mankind can kind of become very drunk on power, a story like this is almost very refreshing to kind of put mankind in a position of a kind of a diminutive position, and to kind of make you realize that all we really have at the end of the day is each other, because everything that is beyond us is so far beyond us that it does not care about us. It is not out there looking out for us, looking down on us. It's not, trying to help us along on our cosmic journey. It is indifferent to us, and at best would only seek to enslave and use us for its own end. So in a lot of ways, it kind of brings humanity together, because, again, we're all we have within the context of this kind of mythology, this narrative. But yeah, that's really all there really to say. I mean, I don't want to go into certain details that would spoil certain things, but long story short, the expedition kind of runs afoul as they start to uncover like this lost city and these kind of this ancient history, and maybe certain things start to wake up. But yeah, so At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. Have you read it? If so, what did you think? If not, as always, I'll put links in the description section below where you can pick it up. Again, it's not a long read, so you're not going to have to invest a lot of your time. But again, it's a great introduction into what has become a genre, what has become an increasingly more popular genre, especially nowadays, and a genre that is kind of permeating beyond just Lovecraft's writing himself, but to other genre, other stories, influencing other storytellers. You're starting to see more of it in film now. So it's for no other reason, just kind of to get a sense of where it began and a lot of the kind of just the visual cues and aesthetics in terms of like how it's described, and really again just the tone of it, because that's one thing this genre really is defined by, its tone, and it's very, very palatable and very distinctive. So kind of for no other reason, just to read something that is so specific to what it is, I would definitely recommend it for that reason alone. And if you're a fan of science fiction and horror and suspense and thrillers, this should be right up your alley. So anyway, guys, At the Mountains of Madness, read it, check it out, come back, give me some of your thoughts, let me know what you think, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!